join in.
Hi, Rory.
Great. Folks, as we begin, feel free to use the chat feature. It'll be on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you want to send messages to each other, you can do a private message. And I'm not going to try to micromanage you on how to do that, but there's essentially, it's set up to send message to everyone. And I think when you type it in, you have an opportunity to make it so it sends just to an individual. So if you're trying to do like quick shout outs to everybody, just realize that we want to keep this to an hour. So please keep the chat box set up for questions. And Graham, you mind waving your hand real quick so everybody can see you, or going off mute so they can hear you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Graham. I'm the office and administrative manager, and I'll be helping Rena and Stu out with some of the camp logistics.
So if you're a parent and you've had payment issues, then you either have or you will be working with Graham. And then Rena, you mind just saying hello real quick?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rena, Sailing Education Manager. I've spoken to a few of you or maybe emailed with a few of you, but I'll be seeing you every day at camp. So
and I'm Stuart. Yeah, the gifts of will be like this. Our faces are right. Masks, unfortunately. And I'm Stuart, and I'm the executive director. And a real brief background. We are trying to start on time, but I've been with the Downtown Sailing Center now since 2011, and summer camp is a hugely important part of what we do. I was the program director, and before that, I actually was just a regular old lowly sailing instructor. So I've been around camp. This is my second year as the executive director, and I'm really privileged and thrilled to have Rena and Graham on the team. Rena, we'll talk a little bit more about herself, but she has an OT background, but also served as one of our SIT instructors, and has been a member and has volunteered with our adaptive sailing program for a long time. And so she comes with a huge amount of skill as well as knowledge. And it's also great that she's an adult with kind of adult. She's not adulting, she's adulted. And then Graham, y'all have probably seen him around a little bit. He has worked with the SIT program as well for the past few years, and has been kind of my right-hand go-to person as he's been growing into this role. So I'll let both of them talk a little bit about themselves in a moment. But I just want to end by saying I'm really thrilled for this team, and I'm also really thrilled for this camp because in the last 9 years, since 2011 when I moved here, we've worked really hard to train our staff to be compassionate and high quality. And additionally, we've really tried to listen to the parents and give the campers what they want. But with the staff of 3 and with running tons and tons of programming, we've never delivered the quality product that I really feel that parents deserve and campers deserve. Not to say that it's been low quality. I think it's been a really great opportunity and a great summer. But I think that this summer we have, with Rena and Graham and with all of the returning staff, we're in a really strong position to deliver a higher quality product than we've ever delivered. So if you've liked the orange juice in the past, it's like orange juice with a sugar pop afterwards. So and I think I'll turn it over to Rena. I think you're next. Just and then Graham, if you want to talk a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds.
All right. Yeah. So briefly, I'm the Sailing Education Manager. That's my title. I did work in occupational therapy before I joined the DSC, but I've been a member of the DSC for about 15 years, starting out with volunteering for the Accessible program, and then moving on to teaching SITs during the summer as a coach and on bigger boats. That's about it.
Great. And Graham, a little bit about you.
Sure. So I have been working part-time at the DSC for about 5 or 6 years, and then I was brought on full-time in April. Prior to that, I worked in museums. I've worked in outdoor education with the National Park Service. And last year, I was working in a K through 1 classroom in Washington, D.C. I am a captain. I hold certifications in basic keelboat. Level 1, I'm a powerboat instructor. I helped out with the camp last year, and as Stuart said, with the SIT program. And I'm looking forward to supporting the camp this year.
Great. And then I will say one thing on behalf of Graham. We've had an overwhelming, I know parents, it's a very challenging time right now as some of the camps you planned to attend are not opening, and some of the camps that your campers plan to attend are opening, but on different dates. And the whole pod thing I know is got everybody in a little bit of snafu. And so I just asked for y'all to bear with Graham. He's doing a great job on the back end of things. But if you can imagine, we're juggling like 60 camp parents, all who have to change camp weeks, add weeks, subtract weeks. And I know that y'all are doing that all across the community. So we're going to bear with you. I thank you for bearing with us. And I think this is a really great opportunity to have a really good collaboration and connection this summer. I think everybody's gotten the basics of the buttons down. I'm not going to try to go into Hangouts. Feel free to figure it out how you want to, but thank you everybody for muting. If you're going to start doing like a wander through your house, just make sure you turn the video off and you can continue to listen to us. And we're going to offer time for questions at the end, as well as in between sections. So if you have a question during the section, feel free to drop it in the chat box. And then if you, we'll try to address each, kind of all the questions at the end of each section. And really briefly, I'm going to go over the agenda, and if I can make sure I do that. There we go. So really briefly, we're going to go ahead and kind of cover how we've been preparing for camp, what we've been doing. We'll talk a little bit about our goals for the organization and our philosophy on that. And then we'll also talk about our camp protocol and what the camp protocol is based upon. So that'll kind of be, I think, kind of the meat and potatoes of a fair bit of kind of the legalese. And then the second half is really going to be focusing on what camp will look like. And then the end will focus on trying to make sure that we wrap up in time for questions. We will talk about what to do, kind of address all the stuff like, what do we do if there's an outbreak? What do we do? And I say outbreak, what do we do if somebody becomes infected by COVID-19, or what if we're all infected by COVID-19? Talking about some of the fun things you want to do at camp. Camp is not just sailing camp, but as we know, it's BOP day, it's the anchoring out, it's Foursquare, it's crossing the swamp. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it all. And then we'll wrap up with what to bring and what not to bring. It's a pretty similar thing to past years with just a couple minor changes. And the agenda was shared for everybody who, I got to stop sharing. Everybody who registered before 5 p.m. today should have been able to receive that in an email around 4:50 this afternoon. But if you didn't, text in the chat, and Graham, if you can send that to people if they want it. Okay. And don't forget, questions go in the chat box, so feel free to ask any questions. As a teacher, I'm used to saying, all right, what questions do you have? So please do put them in the chat box. All right. So really briefly, in a nutshell, the Downtown Sailing Center, back in March, early March, we decided that we were going to focus on two things, and that was members, the typically mostly adult members, a few youth members who have they join early, they get an early bird rate, and that keeps us in business. And more so, camp parents and campers have been joining early as well. And we had an awesome December for camp registrations. And honestly, the membership and the camp registrations we had in December were able to keep us afloat when the cash flow stopped, when business shut down in March. So when and I just hired Graham and Rena on, they actually weren't even working full time yet in mid-March. And we said, who do we want to focus on? And we said, we want to focus on our members and camp. And if we could reopen camp, then we will be able to ultimately reopen other programs. So every effort that we've been making has been made to serve the camp. And even some of the processes that members are doing, even though they assume risk, we're actually making their process a lot more complicated because we want to make sure that everybody who goes through our door is following the same path. And thanks, I see some folks opening up the camp webinar document, so thanks for that. So in March, we started following the WHO guidelines. The WHO had already released guidelines in February, so we started using their guidelines. In mid-March, we started following the CDC guidelines as they came out. And then so the WHO is the World Health Organization. The CDC is the Centers for Disease Control. That's a U.S. organization. And then in mid-April, the American Camp Association released guidelines, essentially draft guidelines, and then draft 2.0 guidelines in late April. And then they ultimately published those guidelines in early May. Rena has been on all of those calls, all these webinars, and the state of Maryland, which has recently released, kind of their plan for camp, literally pulled from the ACA, the American Camp Association document, and said, okay, that's what the ACA recommends. We're doing this. Like literally cut and paste. The ACA, they dealt with some pandemic response from some other stuff going on a few years ago, back in the 2000s. And so their protocol is based on actual case study response. So we've been on it. In terms of how we fit into the other organizations, U.S. Sailing is a national body of sailing organizations. So the Downtown Sailing Center is an affiliate of U.S. Sailing, and we've been a major leader in the country in reopening. And that's not just because Maryland is reopened for business while some places remain on lockdown, but it's because we have been focused on reopening for camp and a limited basis for members. And when we started, we just said, we're going to assume that camp is a go. If it doesn't happen, we're going to do what we can make it to happen anyway. So that's really that on there. And Graham, are you managing the chat box on? I'm looking at my notes. Are you managing the chat box on?
I am.
Great.
I am.
Cool.
I'm sort of answering some questions as well.
Okay, great. Cool. I'm taking pause. This is a chance if you have any questions on what I've covered so far, type them in the chat box really fast, and we'll try to address them before we move on to the next section. All right, we're moving on. So in order for the ACA guidelines, as well as the Maryland state guidelines, has a maximum of 10 technically it's not 10 youth, it's 10 total people at a time. And so we've already operated typically on a 4-to-1 camper to staff ratio. And so we are taking that model of these boat groups and turning that into a pod. Now, the American Camp Association uses the term household. We're not using the term household because it's being used for other terms in the state. So we're just referring to that as pods. Essentially, it's boat groups, but it's your boat group, it's your lunch group, it's your bathroom group, it's your Foursquare group, it's your checkers and chess group. So the pods are really going to be in that 4-to-1 environment. And traditionally, we try to give summer staff a break by only having staff on for 3 days or 4 days maximum and rotating people in and out. And this summer, it's going to be the same staff person all week. And so that's going to be a lot more work on our staff. The staff will be coming in to start for early stay, and they'll be wrapping up at the end of late stay. If all the campers get picked up in their group early, then they can leave. But if one camper in their pod that they're in charge of has late stay, then they're going to be getting those extra hours. So to alleviate that, what we'll be doing for staff is we'll be doing roughly 2 weeks on and 1 week off for staff to prevent burnout. And then also we will be using our assistants. Rory is on the line. I know that. I know there are a couple other summer staff people who are going to be attending this conference or this thing. The assistants will be working with staff who may have a more challenging boat group. Maybe the staff aren't quite as skilled at sailing. And also, if they're off duty for that week, they might be doing some maintenance. So rather than the staff person having to clean the toilets and watch your kids, we'll have assistants also working on that. So the way it will work is, you'll have a pod. So that'll be a boat group of 4, up to 4, with a coach. And then each pod will be joined with another pod. So we'll have 2 pods together, and that will make a team. So we'll have teams of up to 10 total people. So we'll have one team over here on A dock, one team over here go to B dock, one team over here go to the pavilion, which I'll talk about in a moment. Maybe one team over here go to the other side of the pavilion, which I'll talk about in a moment as well. And so we can have a total of up to 32 campers, but that would be 8 staff, 8 times 4. So we'd have 8 staff, 32 campers. That's max. Typically, camp numbers, for those of you who are familiar, we typically operate in that kind of 15 to 25 camper range. And we anticipate that will probably be the same. So we'd be dealing typically with 3 teams of roughly 6 pods. That's kind of what we'd be looking at there. And in terms of the teams, we'll talk a little bit of teams and pods. We'll talk a little bit about the check in and out process in a moment. So we will cover that a little bit later. And I see some people are maybe on the camp webinar overview. But does anybody have any questions about the teams and pods?
And I'd like to interject. If you would like to request certain friends that your son or daughter wants to be in a pod with, just let us know and we can set that up for you guys. So we'll talk about that later on.
And the last thing I'll say on that is the staff is the same staff as last year. We're really lucky to have some really, really great young men and women. And so they're mostly good sailors. They're really good people. And typically the way the pods will work is we'll have one female staff person with a mostly female boat group, one male staff person with a mostly male boat group, and that will make a team. And so that way just deals with any issues that arise. It kind of quells any gender issues we have going on there. So that's typically how it's going to be set up. And our staff is mostly balanced this year, both male and female. So pretty excited about that.
Looks like no questions in the chat room for now.
Great. In that case, I'm going to move on to supplies. The Downtown Sailing Center, as I mentioned, we started off with the WHO, then CDC, then the ACA guidelines that came out, and ultimately now the state of Maryland. And we are strongly stressing hand washing. The Downtown Sailing Center built hand washing stations, and we piped water down our docks. And so the minute a person arrives to campus, go and wash hands, and then with bar soap, bar soap. We then go and take a temperature check. So let's talk about the process a little bit. But in terms of the cleaning solutions, the CDC recommended solutions are bleach solution. So it's bleach diluted in water. So that's our primary disinfectant for the boats, not for bodies, but for boats. For the bathrooms and for some other kind of shared equipment, our main sanitizers will be products that have quaternary ammonium as the main ingredient. The brand names are DSV, the Delta Sierra Victor, and New Foam. Those products, it's not ammonia, it's quaternary ammonium, and they're EPA approved for the killing of coronavirus. They destroy the coronavirus. So that will be used pretty much as Rena says it should be used. She'll be the keeper of the DSV. So the DSV will be used for bathroom sanitation, kind of disinfectant of some shared equipment. And then we have alcohol hand sanitizer in a WHO formula. What that is it's 70% ethanol with glycerin for hand softening. And most of the boats and a lot of the, in addition to hand washing, there's going to be a lot of hand spraying with this essentially aerosolized, using a hand, Windex sprayer of hand sanitizer. And we were able to purchase that from our friends at Charm City Meadworks, who are working with Mount Royal Soap Company. So all of the products we used are CDC, EPA approved. We're not doing any type of magic, and we're not trying to do any invention of processes. We're following CDC recommended guidelines. If anybody has any questions of protocols, they are posted on our website, and we can show you how to find those in a bit. But those are our cleaning products, and I just want to see if we're on time, which is great. So I just want to see if there are any questions about our cleaning products or kind of ratios of cleansers, things of that matter.
No questions in the chat box.
Okay. Great. I hope that doesn't mean y'all are bored. So in terms of the process, I think that we might talk.
Right. All these webinars are boring, Stu. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
We all sit through them all week, right?
We do. So we're going to talk a little bit more about protocols in a minute, but I do want the last thing to bring up, I might have missed it, but it's really important to address. So the Downtown Sailing Center is on the BMI, the Baltimore Museum of Industry's property, and the museum has been closed since mid-March, and they, in their generosity, they allowed the pavilion to be used as a testing facility for pre-surgery screenings for the MedStar health system for COVID-19. So if you're a MedStar patient and you have to go to surgery, you get tested for COVID-19, and they're currently doing that testing at the BMI under the pavilion. The pavilion will be cleared out for camp, like definitely before the first week of camp. But for that first week of camp, which is June 15, if we are guaranteeing 7 days of quarantine for the pavilion. So if the tent for this testing site remains under the pavilion next week, then for the first week of camp, the week of the 15th through the 19th, we will have to make some adjustments to inclement weather policy in case of inclement weather, because we will not be going under the pavilion until it has had 7 days of quarantine without the coronavirus testing tent in there. The BMI is going to continue to offer the testing site. It's likely going to move up under the crane area. So what will happen is that will become the entrance for the coronavirus testing site, and then the other entrance that parents are used to driving into, that will become the camp entrance. So I just wanted to say that before I turn it over to Rena. But if that doesn't bring up any questions, I don't know what questions we might have.
We have one question asking if we feel confident that we'll be able to follow guidelines even if there's rain.
That's a great question. So
do you
for the first
that
week of
now?
camp,
do you want to answer now, or do you want to wait till we get to the poor weather section? Because we did build that into.
Yeah, I'll address it a little bit now, and then we'll cover it a little bit more.
Okay.
So, Tim, I'll answer it right the second to a certain extent, or whoever's on Tim's computer.
Happy to wait, says Tim.
Well, let's just really briefly, we are going to need support from parents in the event of kind of that extreme weather. You know, we all have it every few times a year where there's a massive thunderstorm. Typically, our kids go in and watch a movie in the BMI. With the BMI being closed, unless right now we're not really planning on doing movie day. And so if it is that kind of major thunderstorm, we will be asking for parents to pick their kids up, so we're not getting splashed with water as thunder and lightning rains down around us. And that first week of camp, again, it would only be for the first week of camp if the COVID testing site has not been moved out, there would have to be a modification. So that's that. Light rain. We have tents on ADOC and tents on BDOC. Well, we have a tent on ADOC right now. We will have a tent on BDOC. So that'll actually be the meeting place. So if it is a light rain shower, that's no thunder and lightning, that's available. And we'll talk a little bit more about those processes later on that. So thanks. All right, I'm looking at the things. All right, Rena, I think you're up.
Okay, so we're going to go over kind of what the day and the week.
We got a question from we got a question. So the BMI coronavirus testing site is going to be moved. If you're familiar with the layout of the parking lot, they're going to be moving the site up toward where the crane is. So if the pavilion's down here, the crane is like by the exit by the museum, and there's like a little cubby area for parking where buses typically park, and that's where they're going to be moving the coronavirus testing site. So I hope that makes sense.
They're pretty distant. The other part of it too is they're not testing people who believe they have symptoms. They're testing people who need pre-surgery checks. So they're not necessarily patients who are symptomatic. It's just part of the pre-surgery check that people have to do these days. We've been talking to the techs that are in there, trying to find out all of the 411. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about check-in, check-out, kind of how the day is going to go. We're going to set it up a little differently based on some ideas that I got off the American Camp Association website and some of the webinars that I attended. So what what we're looking for is social distancing. We're trying to promote as much physical distancing as possible. So we decided that the best thing would be to be doing sort of a drive-through check-in, check-out, drop-off, pick-up the way you do for your kids at school. So we're going to be setting up a tent over by the education trailer. I don't know if you guys know where that is. When you first pull into the parking lot, to the right is a big lot. Kind of ahead of you at maybe 2 o'clock is the education trailer. And then straight ahead, a little to the left, is the pavilion. So we're going to be setting up at the corner of that parking lot right in front of the education trailer under a tent, where all you're going to need to do is just pull your car up, say your goodbyes. We're going to have the staff member who's there filling out the binder that you normally are filling out in prior years, where you write in the time and your name and et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to have a staff member doing that for you, so there's no contact with the pen or the binder. We're going to be asking for a little bit more information than we have in past years, obviously, because, you know, we need to make sure that we're on top of everything. We're going to be making sure we get from each person, each parent who drops off, what the contact information is for that day. So every day we're going to be asking for contact information. If anything happens, if you need to pick up your campers because of weather, if we think somebody is sick, we're going to have to be able to contact you right away. So that contact information is going to be pretty important on a daily basis. That's also where we're going to be doing the infrared temperature check, and then logging that. So if you picture it, you're going to pull up in your car, you're going to say goodbye to your son or daughter, or daughters and sons. They're going to hop out of the car. They're going to get their temperature check. We're going to fill out the information. They're going to go with their counselor, and they're going to immediately go wash their hands, and you guys can drive off. So you don't even need to get out of your car. Same thing with pickup. You know, you're going to pull up. We're going to probably walkie the staff member and say, hey, so-and-so's parents here. They're going to wash their hands. They're going to come over and they're going to get in the car. So that's going to be check-in, check-out. We're trying to make it as simple as possible and as physically distant as possible. So it'd be great if you can do your hugs and kisses at home. I know it sounds funny, but that way it can be quick and there's not a long line of people waiting. And then let's see, that's pretty much it for check-in and check-out. Stu, do you want to talk about inclement weather? Unless there's some questions.
Yeah, let's have, we had one question from Gabriella, and then we have a question from Anne. And I'll just write it, but the answer is yes. So campers that are within walking distance are welcome to walk on their own. And honestly, that for older campers who live in the neighborhood, that actually would be the best policy, especially if they're already in their pod group. If they're not in their pod group, then hopefully they can be in their team group. But yes, that would actually be fine. And that's a matter of a phone call of a staff person being able to call and say, hey, just let you know, like, your son or daughter's here. Is that they, did they leave without you?
There's a question from Gabriella asking, how will we check in and out for families who are carpooling? So hopefully you're carpooling with families that are going to be in the same pod. That would be ideal. That would be best practice, so that we're treating all of the campers who are carpooling together as a household or a pod. And so we don't have to worry about any kind of, physical distancing of people that are coming together in cars together. So that would kind of tie into requesting to have, if they want, we're not trying to make this difficult, but the best practice is to have the families kind of stay together, friends stay together. Doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
But that is kind of best practice based on what CDC recommends.
And that's where the
we have a question on masks.
Wait, we'll address that in just a second, Graham, on the mask. But that's where the pods and teams comes in. So if the siblings in your household hate each other, they might not be on the same pod, but they will be on the same team.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, the world is not a perfect place. This is not a perfect process. We're all doing the best we can. So yeah, we're going to support whatever it is that you guys are looking to do, and just try to make it as safe as possible for everybody. Did you want to add? Oh, Stuart's answering the question about face coverings. So we're going to actually cover that in the agenda.
I think it's coming up.
Yep, coming up. So Stu, did you want to talk about inclement weather?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm wondering, did masks actually get covered? Did we put that in the agenda?
The dock use protocols and the boat use protocol,
okay,
where we're going to address that.
All right. So inclement weather. So inclement weather, I'm going to talk about for the majority of the summer first, and I'm going to talk about the majority of the summer first, and then I will talk about week 1, which may be a little different based upon whether we have access to the pavilion or not that first week. For days that it looks like, I'm trying to find the way to say this best. Camp, and due to inclement weather, will be pretty similar to camp with inclement weather in past summers, in the sense that if it is extreme weather, whether it's thunder and lightning and heavy rain showers and big giant thunderstorms, we're going to recommend parents who can pick their kids up, go ahead and pick their kids up. That's going to be that'll be the same, with the exception of that we're going to be preemptive rather than wait and see. So if we see a thunderstorm on the horizon that is likely going to hit, not only are we pulling the kids off the water and getting the boats to the docks like we do, and not only are we getting the kids into undercover off the docks like we do, but rather than going ahead and say, all right, now we're going to go do movie time and then call parents, it'll be as soon as the radio happens, hey, staff, got to get the kids off the water. It'll be the phone tree of, hey, parents, thunderstorm coming, kids are coming back to the docks. So that'll be the thing there. And I need to stop looking at the comments section because I get distracted. So that'll be the main thing there. I think everybody has seen these big rains. Anybody who's a returning camper has seen when we have the big thunder and lightning storms, we have the tons of water, kind of the rain kind of seeps in through the sides of the pavilion, even though the pavilion walls will be down, and just everything becomes like a slip and slide, and it gets chaotic really quickly. And so in those instances, we're going to ask for parents to go ahead and come and pick their kids up if they're able to. If it's just rain, it depends on the temperature, it depends on the amount of rain, and it depends on the constitution of the campers. So for most weeks, in terms of if you have 16 campers, 16 to 24 campers, each group, even if we have up to 32 campers, each group can have its own space under cover. So we have the big tent at the end of the dock. That's up there right now. Next week, we're moving another tent to B dock. And the tent's a 14 by 40. So it's a big space. And then we have the pavilion. So in terms of, it's a rain shower that's going to pass. That's not like wind and rain and kind of crazy. Then the campers will just hang out under their awning, the rain shower passes, and then boom, go sailing again. So in that regard, that's kind of the light inclement weather. In terms of, it's a gray day, it's a hot day, it's all, it's really interesting to me how camps are always allowed to operate even on code red days. We try to minimize, heavy activity if it's a code red day. Parents obviously have the option of not offering camp or not bringing their kid to camp if it's like a crazy, crazy, crazy hot day. So that's kind of the nutshell on that. Any questions on those policies in terms of inclement weather policy?
I'm not seeing anything in there as of yet.
Okay.
Of course, anybody can email us at any time if you think of something later.
For the first week of camp, if the testing site is not moved out, we are really limited to space, pavilion space, because we won't be using that pavilion space for that first week. And so that would mean that our inclement weather policy would be activated more quickly so that we could get kids to their home destinations before any inclement weather happens. And we're well aware that may require, if it's like 3 days of rain and the kids aren't able to go under the pavilion because it's a safety concern, then we'll address that financially, which we're well aware that we may have to do. Fortunately, the middle of June is typically the best weather with the fewest thunderstorms. So we fully believe that most kids will be able to stay on the boats in their pods and teams for most of the summer, or for most of that first week at the very least.
Okay, so it's 6:41, and we definitely are trying not to run over, so we'll see if we can get through the rest of this information. No judgment. I'm going to move on to the boat groups and the staffing. Stuart already kind of went over the basic breakdown of how we're going to team people and also how to break up into boat groups. You guys have been asking in the chat room about how to group people. So please feel free to email me, rena@downtownsailing.org. If you have people that you want your kids to be paired with or grouped with, that's extremely helpful to us because we are creating a spreadsheet for everybody, and that'll be less kind of shuffling around for us. The other part of it too is that the boat groups are going to be assigned to specific boats, and they're going to be on that boat all week. So there's not going to be any cross contact, and as well as PFDs. So we discussed PFDs at length, life jackets. We definitely have enough life jackets for everybody, and we would be assigning life jackets to each camper to use for the week and then sanitizing them at the end of the week after camp is over. Best practice is for kids to have their own PFDs. So if you feel like you want to have your camper have their own PFD, that's totally fine, but you don't have to, because we do have sanitation procedures in place and we do have plenty of life jackets. And same goes with any of the games, any of the ropes that we use. They're all going to be assigned to each team for the week. So there's not going to be cross-contamination among teams. Stu's going to talk a little bit about our dock use protocols versus boat use protocols. And this is where he's going to go into a little bit of discussion about what to wear on a boat versus what to wear on a dock.
Great. So all of our staff are going to be issued cloth face coverings. So they're a 3-ply covering. I might grab it next time Rena hops on and talks, but so that's what they will be wearing when they are dockside. And if they're 2 or 3-ply face coverings, staff can also wear like a surgical mask style covering, but then they also have to cover it with a cloth face covering. And the reason why is you can wash cloth face coverings. Campers can wear any face covering they want to while on the docks. So it could be a buff style, like a neck gaiter style. It can be a bandana. It can be a mask, a $100 mask, surgical mask. We don't care. A bandana style or a neck gaiter style, a buff style will be probably the most functional in the sense that it is not going to blow away in the wind, and nor is it going to be lost if it's permanently around their necks, and would provide some sun protection. Our staff are going to be issued a neck gaiter, a DSC branded neck gaiter as well, and so best practice for staff is to wear the cloth face covering at all times while on the docks and the boats, recognizing that it is not as athletic, nor is it as easy to communicate with the heavier face coverings. So staff will be occasionally going to the buff and then back to the cloth face covering. Campers are going to be required to wear face coverings while on the docks, and while like playing, like, so let's say we're playing Foursquare, buffs up, or neck gaiters up, or face coverings on. While on the boats, it is best practice to wear the face coverings, and it's going to be something that we encourage people to do. But also, it's important to be able to remove the face covering every once in a while for carbon dioxide exhaustion. Essentially, you get all the air in, but you only get some of the carbon dioxide out. So we are going to be asking kids to occasionally, like, hey, while you're untying that up on the bow, go ahead and remove your face covering. And we recognize kids that be kids. In terms of, that's all I wanted to cover, right, Rena? We're talking about.
Yeah, I think so. Just buff use versus mask use on boats, on the docks.
And then we so the Downtown Sailing Center purchased some DSC branded neck gaiters. I'm not trying to hawk them to parents, but they will be available for sale starting next week, and so they're available.
They're pretty cool. They do look pretty sweet. I'm going to be wearing one.
Yeah, so they'll be issued to our staff. We will have some available for campers if they care to buy them, but any face covering, as long as it covers the face and nose, is fine.
And the other part of that too is, again, we've been watching a lot of webinars. We've been doing a lot of research, and I just watched a webinar today that was conducted by a doctor who's also a sailor, and he talked a lot about, everybody was asking questions about, when we're on a boat, we're not going to be wearing masks because, the best practice for safety at sea is to not have your face covered if you fall in. So a buff is the safest alternative to wearing a mask when you're on a boat. And he just talked about how it's not the ideal as far as transmission and droplet transmission, but it makes sense from a sailing perspective because any covering is better than no covering. So a buff on a boat is actually something that's supported by the medical community who is familiar with sailing, in case there's some concern about that. But again, the hand washing is part of the mitigation, and having all of the sailors in teams or in pods is another part of the mitigation. So, but we do not recommend wearing a mask when sailing, because if anyone, adult or child, falls overboard, wearing a mask is not going to be ideal. Any questions about that? All right, cool. So I'm going to move on to lunch. That was a big one that we had to discuss. So it seems like the best practice, besides hand washing, is to make sure that the surfaces that the kids are eating their lunch on is protected. So if you can enclose in their daily lunch bag, a washable placemat, something that, they can bring home and you can throw in the wash to put down on the surface. That seemed like the best idea all around. That way we're not having to store and disinfect and worry about whether or not they got disinfected and et cetera, and you have control over the surface that they're eating off of. The other thing that I purchased is a new foam, which is essentially a disinfectant used by bars to wash their glasses at the bar. So we purchased a gallon of that, and we can use that to spray down and wipe down surfaces if they're used for lunch. So that pretty much, it seems like that pretty much covers the lunchtime space. Although the other part that I didn't put in our agenda is we're also going to have trash cans that have holes in the top, so they can just drop the trash in. They don't have to touch anything. And then it'll be a staff member that takes that trash away every day. So again, just thinking through that process, we're trying to reduce the amount of contact surfaces that anybody, including the campers, touch. Any questions about that? So how will the lunches remain cold? So we will still have coolers. Each team is going to have their own cooler. Again, they're going to be sanitized at the end of the week. So that won't change, but we're just not going to have one cooler. We're going to have a cooler for each team. Same with the water coolers. Each team is going to have their own water cooler. So definitely make sure the kids bring their reusable water bottles. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay, cool. Stu, you're going to be talking about BOP Day.
Great. So BOP Day is my favorite day because the kids are over at BOP hanging out. Well, I guess they're not over at BOP anymore, but over in the grass hanging out. But that's not going to happen this year in the traditional term. So we still want to do pizza day, and the raft ups have been really popular with our staff and campers. And so for BOP Day, we'll do a Deep Pasquale's run. The staff, so probably Graham or myself, will do a Deep Pasquale's run for pizza, and then each pod will go out and anchor their boat either in Canton or out past the bridge and eat their lunch out there. So it'll be maybe not a bridge run, but it'll be on the boat, eat the lunch, hang out, and enjoy the sights and sounds.
Any questions about that? I did see a question from Kate. She asked if the DSC net gaiters are child size. I haven't seen one in person, but Stu, you might be able to speak to that.
I believe that they are somewhat snug for an adult, and so they will be slightly loose on a kid or on a child. So they come in tomorrow, and I will be sure to post some visuals of those tomorrow.
I just want to mention that I know that many of you have been emailing me now. I will do my best to respond tomorrow.
All right, I'm going to go over quickly sanitation procedures. I compiled these from CDC recommendations and also with the help of the ACA, American Camp Association Field Guide. If you guys wanted to take a look at the field guide, it's on the American Camp Association website. Super helpful. The CDC and ACA have been really great, especially the ACA has been really great to help us prepare for all of this. So hand washing is our #1 mitigation. We have hand washing stations on both docks. And we're going to definitely have the kids on a schedule to make sure they're hand washing throughout the day. On as best schedule as we can. The places where hand washing isn't readily available is where we can use the hand sanitizer that we purchased. It's a liquid form, so we're going to have it in spray bottles. The staff is going to be responsible for that bottle, making sure to, give a squirt to the campers' hands. We kind of don't really want the campers to handle the hand sanitizer because it's pretty intense stuff. And so the times that the kids will be using that will probably be on the boats. They'll take it with them. They need it on the boats, and definitely outside of the porta-johns. So that's another area that we were really discussing, the best protocol that we could put in place for sanitation and for keeping everybody safe. So the the kids will be able to access the porta-johns on a schedule. And then also if they need to use outside of the schedule, they'd be still accompanied to the porta-john. But we're going to have them use hand sanitizer before they enter and after they leave, and then wash their hands. So the space between when they walk from the porta-john to the time that they can go to the sink and wash their hands is the time that I'm concerned about. The time inside the porta-john is the time that I'm concerned about. So the hand sanitizer will mitigate any kind of contact with any germs. And then the porta-johns are going to be sanitized throughout the day, definitely at the end of the day. And I'm thinking maybe we would do it in the middle of the day as well, which is going to be, we're going to be using a chemical called DSV. Stu mentioned it earlier. It's going to be, the porta-john will be sprayed down with that, rinsed, and then sprayed down with that. And then it just needs to sit for a few minutes after use. So again, the porta-johns are something that we really had to work through. Oh, the other thing we have planned for the porta-johns is they're going to be locked when camp is not in session. So the porta-johns are dedicated to camp. There are going to be other porta-johns for members, and then there's going to be an accessible porta-john, but the camp porta-johns are going to be only used for camp and locked when camp is not in session, because we don't want anybody accessing those toilets. And that's it for the porta-johns, unless somebody has a question. Looks like no one has any questions. And then I'm going to move on to the emergency procedures. So the ACA recommendation for suspected transmission and suspected illness was based on, I hate to say this, but, and they hated to say this, but they based their recommendations on like active shooter and illness that has happened in camps before. So when the flu, I think it was in 2009, there was an outbreak of H1N1. So they based it on that. So our emergency procedures are based on ACA and CDC recommendations. If we think that someone, whether it's a staff or a camper, is sick, they're immediately going to be taken to an area that is sort of isolated from the rest of the campers. If it's a camper, their staff person is going to stay with them, socially distanced, but stay with them. So they're not going to be up by themselves. And we're going to immediately call all of the parents. So that's why earlier when I said for check-in, we definitely need the daily contact. So the person who would be able to pick up their child during inclement weather, or if we think somebody is sick, we would definitely need to be able to reach everybody. So hopefully we'll never have to do this, but you know, we just wanted to be prepared for it, and all of the staff is going to be trained on this protocol. So we want it to be as simple as possible and as undramatic as possible. We don't want to create a scene. We don't want everybody to get frightened, but that's what we have planned. And then after that, we're going to be sanitizing the premises, and we're going to need to quarantine the premises for 3 days afterwards. Stuart's going to talk about this. I think, Stuart, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but, you know, if we have to close camp because of illness, we understand that it's not your fault. So we will definitely be issuing refunds to parents because, you know, we can't control it. Nobody can control this. So just rest easy. If you think that your camper is sick and you don't want to send them in that day, just let us know. Okay. It's not a problem. We'll definitely give you guys a refund for the remaining days. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything, Stu?
I just want to reiterate that, you know, this is, you know, we recognize that by campers and camp parents putting their trust in us to take care of their kids, it helps us stay in business, and it also helps us deliver a product that's, I think, really important to our community. But also we recognize that that is a two-way street, and so we need to honor our end of that social contract. So this is not about the money. If it can't, and the only other thing I was going to say is that depending on the infection and how it happens and when it happens, is it could be just a pod, it could be the whole team, or it could be the entire camp. So most likely it'll be the full team. So potentially 2 other pods could operate, or 3 other pods could continue operating. Most likely the whole team within that infected person, whether it's a staff person or a camper, would go home for at least 3 days, and camp parents just be reimbursed for those days.
Because we're an outdoor camp, it was recommended by both CDC and ACA that we can immediately sanitize the area. We don't need to wait since it's outdoors. And then also, because it's an outdoor camp, 3 days is plenty of time to quarantine the area before people re-enter it. Okay, I'm going to move on to, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to run over a little bit. Sorry. I'm going to move on to what you can do at home to prepare. It's your part. So I would say definitely have a discussion with your kids about what to expect at camp, that things are going to look a little different, but we have their safety in mind. Number one, we're trying to make sure that we keep all the campers safe. We want to make sure that you as parents have peace of mind that your kids are going to be in a safe place. Same for our staff. We want to make sure our staff feels comfortable and safe, interacting with the kids, and having a good time. We want people to feel relaxed as well. The screening tool that I sent to the first 2 week of sign up. So there's a new screening tool that we're going to be giving parents so that you can track your kids' temperatures for 2 weeks before camp. You would be just tracking them, and then you can bring the screening tool the first day of camp. If you don't want us to have that information for privacy reasons, that's fine. It can be used also as a guideline for yourself, but it's highly recommended by the CDC to make sure that temperatures are tracked before camp starts. You can work on cough and sneeze etiquette with your kids if you haven't already. And then also, this is probably relevant for all of us, keeping our hands away from our face, especially our mouths and our mucous membranes. And then if your kids are not quite ready for if they haven't been really using masks much, maybe kind of start introducing a regular use of them, or getting them used to using a buff. So just the practice of using a mask to get ready for camp is pretty important. For the staff, we're requiring them to use their masks. We're issuing them masks, as Stu said earlier. We also are going to be issuing them life jackets that they're going to be leaving at work. They're not going to be taking them home with them. And then for anybody that needs to use public transportation, we're asking them to bring a change of clothing. So when they get to the DSC, just changing into other clothes. Again, just to stay safe. And then staff, the 3 of us have all been tracking our temperatures every day because we're already interacting with our staff, and we're going to have a training next week, and we're going to be tracking temperatures with them as well. So what we're asking of parents and campers, we're trying to do ourselves. And then the other thing that we're asking of staff is for them to commit to safe practices even when they're not at work. So just trying to take care of themselves, trying to make sure that they are remaining healthy, and we're trying to support them in that. All right, so are there any questions about that? Looks like Stu has been answering questions in the chat space. All right, if there aren't any questions about that, then Stu, you can move on to things to bring or not bring. You're muted. Stu, you're muted.
This is our last section. I'm never muted. This is the last section, folks. So thank you for bearing with us. Things not to bring. This is not new this year, but this is actually really critical this year to actually enforce. Is please do not have your camper bring portable electronics to camp. We've been really relaxed on this for the last few years, but these portable gaming devices get shared, and please don't bring portable electronics. Please keep mobile phones hidden. Books are great. Books are actually okay and great. I've never seen a kid share a book with another camper. So books are fine, but electronics not fine. And the books need to be like in a paperback or like hardback, not like in a e-tablet sort of thing. They're going to need to bring face coverings. So if your camper is notorious for losing things, having things fly off their face, having things, chocolate milk goes everywhere every day, have them bring an extra bandana or an extra face covering. Our staff are kind of using a light and heavy. Feel free to do the same thing with your camper. Reusable water bottle, like all years. If your camper forgets to bring their reusable water bottle, they'll be sadly drinking out of their 8-ounce polar water bottle that you pack their lunch for the day. Or we'll be cutting up their high C jug for them to have water. So they need to bring their reusable water bottle. New this year is a beach towel. We do ask for kids to bring something to sit on. Part of the risk mitigation is making sure that people are not sitting on communal spaces. So picnic bench, stuff like that is going to be not really a normal part of camp. So we'll be sitting on the blankets. In terms of foot gear, closed-toed shoes. Some kids really like wearing Keen style where it's covered. My recommendation is just an old pair of sneakers that they wouldn't mind getting wet. So kids like to dangle their feet over the side of the boats, and you're going to want to be able to get those things dried out at the end of the day. But closed-toed shoes, sneakers, or sandals are there. And let me see if I got one.
Also, something you can throw in the wash if you have to.
Something you can throw in the washer dryer. And the last thing is, if your child is prone to falling in the water, pack a change of clothes, and then always sunscreen and a hat. So sunscreen, hat, refillable water bottles. Those are kind of your classic DSC brings. Your lunch bag, and then if kids fall in the water all the time, change of clothes. I was that kid. And then the new additional things is the towel and the face covering. And then again, just no portable electronic devices.
We have a question on the best style of foot gear.
Already looks like it's been answered.
Yeah, just closed-toed shoes. Yeah. So
okay. Question about neck sunburns and baseball hats have blown off.
Yeah, so I think the neck gaiter would be helpful.
And then a type of hat to recommend.
Some kids like those like Orioles bucket hats that have a little chin strap. They're kind of the small boonie hat style wrap around.
A lot of sailors like those.
Yeah.
Even adult sailors.
Yeah. So those are popular. Those have a neck strap which can help it from blowing off. Our staff have gotten a lot better at man overboard drills, so we've lost fewer and fewer hats over the years.
Also, you do not need to pack hand sanitizer for your kids because we bought 10 gallons of hand sanitizer this year. So we have plenty. It doesn't have any perfumes in it. It's pretty basic, no scent. Unless you're concerned about your child, like if your child has allergies or skin concerns, something like that. If there's a specific brand you prefer, just let us know and we'll make sure that it stays with your child. But otherwise, you do not need to pack hand sanitizer for your kids. Any other questions? We did it. We're only 8 minutes over.
And if anybody wants to look at the ingredient to the hand sanitizer, it's the Mount Royal Soap Company Comrade soap. And it is literally just alcohol and glycerin, both of which are flu grade.
And again, my email address is rena@downtownsailing.org. So if you have any questions, or if you want to let me know what boat group you would like, just go ahead and email me.
And my email is Graham, Graham @downtownsailing.org. And I'm also working on boat groups and billing issues.
All right, folks. Well, we will stay on a few more minutes for any other questions or concerns you have, but we want to respect your time. So thank you so much for joining the meeting, and feel free to sign off as you'd like.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Graham and Rena, thank you so much for being on the meeting.
Yeah, it was good. Should we stop recording?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and stop recording.
Okay.